and mentorship.
He's a health and cognitive expert.
Known as a spiritual confidant to respected industry leaders. CEO of 3 companies.
Coach and minister Ron Kardashian.
Good friend, Coach Ron Kardashian.
My Facebook followers are about to go live. Tim, take it away.
Hey, welcome everyone. Welcome to another episode of Always Winning in Leadership. And I am super excited about today's topic, Hijacked, how smartphones and AI are rewiring our emotional regulation. Fascinating. I'd say groundbreaking and new research on this stuff. And so I'm Tim Boyko. I lead the growth department here at Hire. Of course, with us, the amazing executive coach, Ron Kardashian. And it's like, he's not just an executive coach, he's a neuroscience expert. And the things I've learned working with him on how the brain is influenced by so many, not just the brain and the heart is so amazing. So anyway, I'm going to pass this over to Coach Ron here to get started.
Thank you so much, Tim. I'm also live on Facebook. We've got 2 cameras, so if I'm not looking at you, it's because I'm being interviewed over here. So hopefully you can hear Tim and I'm not being cut off. Tim, am I still in the frame on Restream? Because I know when you got off, it cut my frame off. But as long as you can see me head to toe, we're good to go. Let me just wait for him. Trying to set up a multimedia center where we can broadcast on all channels has been a little challenging, but we're working it. Does that work, Tim? Okay.
You gotta when I focus on you, you gotta move it up a little bit because it chops off the top of your head.
Chops off the top of my head. Okay. Go ahead and try that now. We'll get this down. Okay. Thank you guys for joining. I think what's happening is I'm getting an influx of emails on people that are happy, but they're flat. People's walk, not only spiritual walk, but mental walk, career walk, has been stagnated. Of course, market fluctuations, looking at this administration, the dynamics of family, career, wealth accruement. This is why I've dedicated my life to enhancing mankind in a certain capacity. So I want to break down the hidden cost of constant connection because we are now in a technology era, obviously. And we were in a engineering era, we were in a metals and developmental era, we've gone through all these eras. And now I think what's happening is times are culminating. And so I want to open up with some stats that really grab us because I want to lay this foundation not as a means to get rid of our cell phones, get rid of our technology, but how do we adapt with them? Now, university research shows that chronic attention fragmentation, which means your thoughts are being fragmented. You're pulled in different directions. Here, you're trying to develop your life over here, develop more intimacy with your families, and yet we've got these phones that are living with us. One guy said, I have an affair with my phone. It's not funny, but funny because it's like it has taken away the bridge of intimacy with his friends, with his, wife, and with his children. And so the university research says that we're fragmented and it can reduce emotional self-control by 20 to 30%, Tim. That means your phone may be shaping your reactions more than your values do. So I want to frame this clearly so you don't, get convicted. That's not the purpose. It's to get educated so that you can make adjustments and operate at peak performance. Now you have to remember, I'm used to working with pro athletes. I'm used to working with entrepreneurs, heads of state, people that are looking for cutting edge adaptation and less fragmentation. So this is not a discipline problem and it's not a character flaw. This is a neuro-training issue. So the biggest risk of AI isn't that machines are getting smarter, it's that humans are becoming less regulated while holding these powerful tools. So let's talk about really what's happening to the brain under pressure, because I'm trying to reduce anxiety for my own life, quite frankly, for my clients and for the world at large. So let me explain how the prefrontal cortex works, which most of you who haven't gotten my best-selling book that Dr. Daniel Amen endorsed, grab it. It's an easy read, and it really talks about how do I understand this temple that I'm living in for true optimization. Now, the prefrontal cortex governs impulse control, emotional brake system, right? We put on the brakes on the brain. Literally, Tim, you remember this. Dr. Amen said, Coach Ron's theories will help you put the brakes on the brain. Well, with all humility, guess who had to learn that first? Me. I did not have this down. I'm still working on it. And I think you seeing tier one level coaches, who are willing to be vulnerable can give you some hope, because this has affected my long-term decision-making process. And that's what excessive smartphones and social media do. They reduce activity in the prefrontal cortex, specifically the dorsolateral part of the brain. So when you're trying to fulfill your calling, you're trying to do career advancement, you have long-term financial decision-making things, it is obstructed.
So I wanted to ask a quick question here as you're talking, because is it
Yeah,
any activity on the phone that is causing this, or is it like what they call the doomsday scrolling, where you're just
yeah.
endlessly looping through things?
Tim is asking for you guys on Facebook, is it just doomsday scrolling when you're just scrolling, 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 or is it actually the phone itself? Well, university study done at Harvard showed that the recipients told them to put the phone down right next to them, and then in one group, and then answer these questions, go through these quizzes. The second group, they removed the phone and put it in another room. Interestingly, the scientists were completely fascinated that the ones who did not have the phone in the room actually were more cognitively online, coherent, emotionally regulated just by the absence of the phone. And the theory
Wow.
there is that the brain, and we'll get into this in a minute, but just to fast forward into the show, we're going to talk about the amygdala, which is the fight, flight, or freeze response. So, in essence, you're always anticipating breaking news. You're always anticipating the text message. You're anticipating the email. You're anticipating the next post. Do you feel the anxiety on that? Just that alone.
Wow. So
So,
it's not related to an activity. It's literally weighted. It's really the
yeah.
relationship between us and
Mhm.
the device.
Correct. And I think, well, Charlie Kirk, I remember watching him in an interview. He said, Friday night, the phone stays in the kitchen. I'm in the living room and the bedroom. And there's a lot of proof now scientifically for this, and also spiritually, which we'll get into in our next broadcast. If you guys are watching, want a little bit more spiritual dimension this about obstruction, you can join the conversation there. But just to say, focus on this first point, the brain under pressure. When the prefrontal cortex goes offline, emotions don't disappear, Tim, they run the meeting. So think about that. Your emotions don't disappear, they start running your marriage. Guilty, right? And this is tied to leadership and family. You've got faster irritation, you've got a shorter fuse, less patient, and then more regret that you deal with after your own reaction. Guilty, 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 guilty. I want to be the first one to say it. Now, to Tim's point on the amygdala hyperactivation, the key point here is from the University of Michigan. This was a 2019 study. I'm just getting it now. Chronic doom scrolling is associated with heightened fight, flight, or freeze response. It's the amygdala. Now, the brain cannot distinguish between a real threat, Tim, and a digital threat. All headlines become neurological stressors. Everything. So basically, translated, your nervous system thinks it's under attack, even when you're sitting on the couch. This is crazy because that increases anxiety, hypervigilance, sleep disruption, and emotional, uh, you know, not vitality. What's the word I'm looking for? You're very volatile, in other words. And, I keep saying I'm guilty because I remember my wife going through heavy anxiety watching me hold the phone. And as I talked with her about that, I really didn't understand her cry, but now I do. and it's very emotional to me because when I would look at the phone and get a bad email, say it came from the IRS, the visceral response, just sitting in complete stillness, you look at it and you have a reaction. Ah, I'm working with a client now whose husband will use the phone, and all of a sudden a video will play really loud. It completely destabilizes her nervous system, and it's creating an emotional drag and an upset that's completely avoidable. So it's actually creating a looping process, which we'll go into in a minute.
So the question I was having, because like what you just said about the phone being in the room, how many people sleep with their phones in their bedrooms?
Yeah, we're
And so
all
then,
guilty of that, all of
yeah,
us.
yeah, and so you're literally never actually getting into those deep sleep states because the brain is still
Possibly,
having that relationship with the
possibly.
phone sitting there.
I
Wow.
would think so. I think that that's a safe estimation. I mean, I'm watching some of these big neuroscientists talk about I'm not using my phone for the first 30 minutes after waking up. I'm guilty of this. I get up. I've got people that send me text messages from the East Coast, so it's hitting at 5 a.m. So now what I'm doing is I'm completely powering down my phone. I'll get up. I'm going to do some meditation, say some prayers. That is what we call a technology sabbatical, and where you're just practicing controlling the brain instead of falling into what we call the dopamine trap. And this is that reward system hijack we talked about. Let me just reference Harvard Medical School. Scrolling triggers dopamine the same way in the reward system pathway as gambling, Tim. Now,
Mm,
this tripped me
wow.
out because I actually coached a gentleman who was an excessive gambler. He bought his house cash, did extremely well, but was chronically on heightened anxiety and some barbiturates to calm himself down. I didn't have this data back then when I was coaching him, but I did have a perception and a discernment that you may want to look at the areas of your life that you're disfragmented and what is causing a dysregulation in you. Well, the outcome was not just leaving his phone. In the process of trying to regulate emotionally, he developed an addiction to alcohol, drugs, pornography, anything that would create this sedative to this dopamine trap. Now, let me explain the loop here. We have a novelty spike, right? So we're looking at the phone, we see it, it's very stimulating, it's very warm. Dopamine releases, and then 10, 20 minutes later, an hour later, if depending on how long you're scrolling, the emotional system drops. Then you need more scrolling to feel normal. So if you've ever grabbed your phone and set it down, and then like 30 seconds later, you'll look at the TV and then you'll reach for the phone again. The more you scroll, the less joy real life produces. The less joy real life produces. So when we tie in AI, algorithms learn emotional triggers, and AI optimizes for engagement, but not regulation. So humans adapt faster to AI than AI adapts to humans. And so this is something we just need to be aware of, that we need to use these tools proactively, but not let them control our emotions, because the AI is not designed to regulate you. I mean, we've just gotten news that ChatGPT actually contributed to a child committing suicide. It didn't know how to regulate unless your prompts are completely governed, which I'm going to do a whole teaching on AI prompts. You can't just say, give me this, give me that. I want people to start talking from the heart inside these AI tools so that it begins to understand your frame of mindset, because it's just going to give you a general mindset. It's not going to understand any emotion. It's not that it's a bad thing, but it can be an abused thing. Does that make sense? And which really leads to a loss of self. Now, the DMN network, default mode network in the brain, DMN. University of Sussex said constant stimulation disrupts the DMN network, default mode. So think about your brain as it goes into this category where the brain's reflection is controlling your identity. This is massive for a culture that we're working with now with students as one of my companies is exploring giving them assessments so they can understand their identity. I mean, in church circles, ecumenical circles, or in your parish or in your mosque, you're seeking identity. We're all seeking it. Like, what is my real identity? And the excessive phone use diminishes that ongoing. So the DMN is active when we reflect, when we integrate emotions, and we rest mentally. So you're busy, but disconnected from yourself. You see that? So some of these symptoms that come along with this DMN going offline is you're going to have more mental noise. You're going to have reduction in creativity. If you've asked yourself, God, I'm just not as creative as I used to be. I'm losing my drive. I'm suffering from depression and anxiety. That's emotional numbness. Or you're not like, for example, early years in my spiritual walk, I was so motivated to get up and go help nonprofits. I mean, I went and handed out turkeys, and I used to do programs at battered women's shelter homes. And ladies and gentlemen, we got to keep those things going. But what happens is we get so weighed down, we don't know why we're weighed down. Now, trauma affects this, guilt, shame, some of these heart areas, decisions, regrets. But the phone is the mild sedative that's actually making the issue worse. And it's actually defragmenting us. I call it identity fatigue, to where we've really lost touch. Now, I'm gonna say something very personal here, especially to my Facebook friends. I run in the highest levels of some government and ecumenical circles. It's such an honor to be acquaintances with some of these world leaders. But I'll tell you, they're very disfragmented. I've seen the pulse change over the last 25 years in private practice. And people are now blame shifting, right? Which is a mental issue. Guilty. Blame shifting as to the reason why I am not so communicative anymore. Possibly our phones. And so my heart here is not say get rid of the phone. Let's learn how to optimize this thing so it doesn't reduce gray matter. Now, gray matter is a Korean university study. The ACC, anterior cingulate cortex, and gray matter are involved in the structural. This trips me out. If you're listening, you better write this down, because excessive smartphone use correlates with reduced gray matter in the ACC. And that ACC regulates empathy, Tim, emotional pain, conflict resolution. I am guilty, guilty, guilty. You talk about developing a callous world. Boy, the enemy of the soul knew, I'm going to trap these fools like none other. Where we're smarter than AI. But we've got to bring in the science to adjust to our spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical lives, or else we're ignorant. It says, "Don't be ignorant of the enemy's devices," is a famous proverb. Don't be ignorant as to the subtle attack. It's like a slow cancer, where it begins to erode at the relationships of our life, but it starts with ourselves. So when you're trying to develop yourself as an executive, you're trying to develop yourself as a leader, and you don't have the self-control at the home. Again, I'm guilty. I'm not telling anybody that. I'm pointing to myself. Point at you, three fingers pointing at me, right? Is that we've got to just help one another understand day-to-day life function. So as we wrap up today, let me translate this. Overuse doesn't just affect mood, it reshapes emotional capacity. This stuff reshaped me. It did. I'm not only the CEO of this company, I'm a client. I talk to my guys, I'm accountable. I have a coach, I'm accountable. I have, mentors and leaders and therapists, and I keep a tight circle because I know myself. Now, the important tone here is that this is relational. It's not your destiny. It's just a relationship that you're having with the phone, with the tools. It's not your destiny, because the brain remains plastic. Now, here's the good news as I wrap up, is that there is an ability to restore, and it restores within 24 hours. It begins restoration, because evidence-based recalibration tools are showing us that a 24 to 24 to 48 hour digital fast actually brings the brain right back online. Try this. Try it tonight. Watch what happens. Turn it off at about 6 o'clock. You sit down with dinner, or if you're a single person, turn it off, grab a book. Even better, I did internship at a clinic years ago in cognitive health and physical health, and the physician was talking about using calligraphy. You don't even need to get a calligraphy pen. Just sit and write how your day went. Today I was really frustrated. I noticed I was edgy, or I was in a great mood today. Let me say why I was in a great mood, and get the neural tracks back on schedule. And then what I would suggest is what I'm doing now: schedule phone-free blocks. For example, I was just with an executive yesterday. The wife was disgruntled that he brings the phone in the bedroom. He's on it for 4 hours, and then 10:30 rolls around. He hasn't even talked to her. So what I suggested is, and he says, well, he blames it on, I have to do business. Great. Totally understandable. Let your wife know. And my wife taught me this, and man, I didn't even live it. I thought she doesn't understand. That mindset alone, when you can't receive information, is showing you've got an emotional discharge, and you've got non-empathetic or compassion and understanding if you've been through it. But really, it's empathy, because it diminishes it. Mine was completely shot. So I suggested to him, if you've got a meeting or you've got something to do, just tell your spouse, hey, I'm going to turn my phone off now, but I'm going to turn it back on at 7 o'clock because I need to check for some emails to prep for tomorrow. I will only be on it for 1 hour. You know what that does to your own psyche? It shows how much power and control you have. So these micro elements of initiating control will make you less irritable and actually less controlling with other people, because that's what the missed signal is. It's, in one hand you're controlling it, but in the other hand you have no control. Did you see how it's double-sided like that? That makes sense, Tim?
It does. So, a question I have for people who are new to this, and because you don't know, from corporate America and all my life, you don't know your own fish tank that you're
Hope you
swimming
guys
in.
can hear him. If not, I'll repeat the question. Go ahead.
So the question here is, you gave one sign of behavior just now of a
Yeah.
shutdown, that's happening neurologically.
Yeah.
What are other things that people need to be listening to as feedback from other coworkers, friends, whatever, that are signs of not a character flaw, it's not a fault with me, but my
Yeah.
brain is overloaded and shutting down?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So Tim was asking, can you get feedback from coworkers or pick up on cues to where you're starting to see a restoration process, or you're actually starting to see symptoms of dysregulation? Which one?
Correct. Both
Both?
both of
Okay.
them. Yep.
Okay, both. So that's a really good question. Remember something about neuroplasticity. It goes either way. It can rewire plasticity comes from the word pliable. So the brain immediately wants to move. So if you find yourself more short fused with people, guilty, you know that you're coming offline. If you find yourself constantly irritable or dissatisfied or into moving into more chronic states of depression, it's not only the phone, because the goal isn't to abandon technology. The goal here is to retrain the nervous system so technology stays a tool and not a tyrant. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? AI isn't stealing our humanity. Dysregulation is, Tim, and regulation can be rebuilt. We're going to go into this whole segment on regulation before revelation, because you can have all the knowledge in the world, but not operating in this simple element of kindness. I mean, really, what good are we doing on the earth? So we have to balance these two. So one of the triggers that you can find out is irritability and dysregulation. On the flip side of it, where you know that I've been putting down my phone, I've been doing some breathing work, spend time in nature, be intentional with human connection. I'm really big on the word intention. Intentionality is comes from within. Like when I'm coaching people, the reason why they get so much breakthrough is because I'm deeply intentional, 100% focused. The phone is over there. It's not even in the same area when I'm coaching. This keeps me on an A game in another dimension. So the way you can ascertain if the phone isn't impacting you, or some of these deep heart issues are starting to settle, is you are actually feeling discerning a sense of freedom, even if everything doesn't look perfect. Even if you haven't got the promotion, you're like, I have a peace that kind of surpasses my understanding. It's my understanding is that this I shouldn't be comfortable here. I really should be nervous, but actually I'm not. This is where focus boxing comes in. Focus mint clinically we've shown helps rewire, systematic rewiring. Weight training is unbelievable in terms of realigning the parasympathetic nervous system, developing more bone structure. Remember, blood is formed in the bones. Casual walking in nature. Keep the phone in your pocket, or better, I leave it in the car. I'll leave it in the car and I'll walk. And it's very uneasy in the beginning because you're thinking, where's my phone? I have actual phone anxiety. So remember, it's not to abandon, it's to retrain the nervous system so technology stays a tool, not a tyrant.
So real quickly, because on the tyrant, we don't want technology to be a tyrant. In our homes, we focused a lot of today's talk on the physical devices like a phone and AI in them
Yes.
and stuff like that.
Yes.
Homes are littered with Amazon Echoes, the little home voice devices, or
Yes.
if you have
Yes.
the Apple version, and I know there's other versions out there.
Yes.
Did the research go into similar effects with those kind of devices that are updating you and always aware and listening to your conversations? And is your brain having the same relationship with that?
No, I mean, these studies did not even incorporate additional technological tools. It was just specifically
Okay.
what is the tool you're carrying every single day. And I think now 6 out of 7 billion people on the planet, discretionary on those numbers, have a phone. So when we're seeing the pulse of emotional dysregulation, now I'm working closely with the Heart Math Institute, and they have monitors set up that are tracking heart rate variability. So when you're talking to a guy like me, I'm getting global statistics of the influx of heart regulation. And this is why I'm such an advocate on, hey, where the heart is, there's your treasure. But this is an easy fix. Is that if you're educating yourself, if you're increasing your self-awareness about your own idiosyncrasies, your own setbacks, and you're really looking to optimize your life, then getting tools like this, one thing I want to leave with you is do not underestimate the power of regulated breathing. I mean, you talked to me 20 years ago, I would have laughed at you. Breathing, you crazy? I ain't got time for that. But now I'm understanding that every pro athlete that I've coached, first thing we teach them in the weight room is to breathe, because the breathing prevents hernia, it prevents a lot of injury. But if you look at the parallel as we age, regulation is the number one thing that we can use to prevent injury.
That's
So,
awesome.
yeah,
And it's the
it's
first
so
thing you taught
simple,
me
but
too.
it's so hard to do. Go for it.
Correct.
You got what it
Yeah, when
takes.
it's like that was the first thing you taught me, the power of the pause.
Yes.
And for
I wrote
me,
about it
actually,
in
it's
my book. Yeah. Yeah. The
yeah,
power of the pause is a 30-second decision. Tim was asking in my book. He was learning the power of the pause. Something I preached before I lived. Just full disclosure, I I was very emotionally dysregulated. People will tell you, he's an angry guy. He was an addict. Guilty, guilty, guilty. I mean, I don't deny any of the flaws because at first I did because I was embarrassed. But when you start emotionally regulating, what happens is you develop an internal self confidence, and that confidence bridges to humility, which is the gateway to promotion. So if you got to funnel back to say, okay, if the outcomes of my life are not stair stepping, I'm building a stair here, then I have to go back to the last step that I was on. And I can't just stare up the stairs, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said. I got to step up the stairs. But if you step up with that old baggage, it's going to actually feel heavier because as you increase in elevation, the air gets tighter. These are applicable metaphors for increasing financial stability, leadership's reach. You want to reach more people, more sincere parenting, intention with the kids, not attention, intentionality. And so over the next couple weeks, we're going to dive into these tools. It's my way of contributing back to society and helping everybody continue the mantra, always winning in leadership. I'm Coach Ron. Thanks for joining. Wanted to stay on time. Tim, thanks for the questions. We're on for next week.
We are. We will be
Okay.
here next week. And I loved everything. If you got to go back and listen to this, everyone. I mean, this was a powerful, powerful conversation and a lot of wisdom that Coach Ron brought in here. We got to have a healthy relationship. So we'll see you all next week.